My name is Michael. I am a 30-year-old employee at a large food firm. I joined the organization 8 years ago after receiving my undergraduate degree. Although I work in the planning and sales department, I am merely an average employee, neither exceptionally good nor exceptionally bad. I'm currently working out of the company's headquarters in the hopes of avoiding a demotion. My wife and I were classmates in college when we first got married. Grace is her name. We were in the same economics seminar at the same university, which allowed us to get to know one another better. We were married shortly after we graduated from college. Grace became a full-time housewife once we were married, so she didn't pursue employment after graduating. After getting married, we had anticipated becoming parents soon, but even after a few years, there was still no indication that our dream would come true. We were in our 20s and both desperately desired a child, but we hadn't given reproductive treatments much thought. I've always secretly admired Grace since she's always been a wonderful student and has always given her studies more attention than I have. After being married and unable to conceive, Grace seems to have been pursuing a professional qualification. She was a stay-at-home mom without kids, so maybe she had extra time on her hands. Grace just informed me that she passed the exam to become a certified public tax accountant. Michael, I've passed the CPA exam. Grace, good job. I'm happy for you. I smiled and congratulated Grace, though my expression could have looked a little forced. I'm just an unemployed white-collar worker like everyone else. Grace is a qualified professional with a bright future, so when I learned that she intended to become a certified public accountant, I started to worry about what would happen to our plans to have a child. Where would I stand if Grace used her qualification well, made more money than I did, was a social butterfly, had a child, and raised one? I was concerned that I might not be required any longer. After Grace received her certification, she was full of enthusiasm, but my feelings towards her grew dimmer by the day, and our relationship grew more difficult. Grace didn't seem to get why I was being aloof. Michael, have you been feeling unwell recently? Grace would often question me, her expression bewildered, but I was too proud to tell her how inferior I felt. I was merely angry at my own pitiful self. I started arriving home later and going out to drink with my coworkers more often after work. We had less conversations at home with Grace. My petty male pride was definitely affecting our relationship, but I still loved Grace. I brought up the subject of divorce with Grace, who appeared to be thinking about becoming a certified public accountant. Grace accepted to the divorce with ease because our relationship had grown unpleasant and our chats had stopped. I reasoned that Grace might similarly feel bad about not being able to have kids. I went to my favorite diner by myself the day before I divorced Grace, and I grieved in private. I thought back to our times together, remembering my college friend Grace. I wasn't sure if it was the proper decision to pursue a divorce. Grace had always taken good care of me, even during our college years, whether it was by assisting me with my schoolwork or taking notes for me at school. Although it feels like I've always relied on Grace, there was a part of me that was afraid to admit how awful I was. It's unlikely that Grace developed a distaste for me, but the momentum of things just kept going. We ended our marriage and began our individual lives. Grace and I lost touch with one another following the divorce. After breaking up with Grace, I was expected to approach my work with a new perspective. But when I got back, my enthusiasm for my work appeared to fade even more because no one was home. I felt as though I had lost the motivation to put in a lot of effort and had merely started working every day. I didn't detest my work, but I didn't think it was all that fulfilling, so consequently, I didn't perform any better. I was then moved to the accounting department from the planning and sales department. Despite my lack of accounting experience and my confusion over my abrupt move to the accounting department, I ultimately chose to work in the field because I felt it was preferable than being demoted. Handling money meant that it was an anxious profession. Furthermore, Jacob, the president's son, was my supervisor in the accounting division. Jacob was known for being extremely rigid and driven. He was a graduate of an international university, had worked for several large corporations, and held certifications in another nation as a certified public accountant and a certified public tax accountant. The president's son was tipped to be the future president with a profile like that. Having someone with his caliber on staff was encouraging, but regrettably, he was also very unforgiving to other staff members. What is this document, Michael? In general, you do paperwork too slowly, and your analysis is too cursory. I apologize. It's been really difficult for me to transfer. Stop blaming others for everything. Justifications are inexpensive. We anticipate significant growth for our company, and we won't accept any excuses. I apologize. I'll use greater caution from now on. You ought to learn more about accounting if you have the time to apologize. Without even a rudimentary understanding of accounting, how are you going to function in a company? Yes, I'll study more about accounting. Jacob was berating me, and I was perspiring. I thought I was going to be in a lot of trouble. I came to the conclusion that I had no time to whine about not understanding accounting. All right, this is now a matter of pride. I'm going to be an accounting whiz. For the first time in a very long time, I experienced intense passion in my heart. Perhaps it was Jacob's fervor that impacted me, but his remarks appeared to lead me to the realization that I couldn't continue as I was. I got books on accounting from a bookstore, but reading the text didn't really assist me grasp it. I thought that going to accounting school could be the best option after conducting some research. In order to exchange information and establish friends with others who shared my interest in accounting, I registered in a school that was quite close to my house right away. I opted for a school that provided weekend sessions due to the excessive overtime Jacob had me working during the week. I'll officially start working as a professional accountant here. Jacob will be surprised by me. With dedication, I opened the door to accounting school. There were already a number of students in the room. My heart leaped for the first time in a long time when I saw this image, which brought back memories of my time as a student. It brought back fond memories of my early years. When I think back on my time as a student, Grace always seems to be there. Actually, Grace was by my side no matter what. I was so engrossed in my thoughts that I failed to realize that the teacher, who was the school's tax consultant, had entered the room. I let out a startled exclamation the instant I saw the teacher. It was none other than Grace, my ex-wife, who was teaching at this institution as the tax consultant. There was an error. It appeared as though she had grown younger and more animated. She must be enjoying her career as a tax counselor. Grace was explaining accounting with a lot of passion. Even a novice like me could understand the structure and idea of accounting thanks to her very clear explanation. The other kids were nodding along as they listened intently to Grace's lesson. Grace is performing admirably, as was to be expected. It was as though I was still Grace's spouse, and I was proud of her. Grace looked at me, and our eyes locked, so maybe she caught my intense gaze. After a brief moment of surprise, Grace collected herself and focused on her presentation. I left the classroom after the talk was over. Grace then hurried up to speak with me. Michael, what on earth are you doing here? Grace's eyes widened as she looked at me, clearly astonished. I asked her if she might stop by a local cafe and talk. Grace nodded solemnly, and we made the decision to head to the cafe together. Performing this task reminded me of my time in college spent with Grace. As soon as we got to a cafe close to the school, Grace started asking me questions. Michael, I was genuinely shocked to see you in class. Why did you come to the lecture, and why haven't you gotten in touch with me yet? What in the world have you been up to since the split? In addition to her job as a tax accountant, Grace told me that she spent her weekends as a business school instructor. It was dedicated and hardworking. Exactly like Grace, I thought to myself. She had not altered since our days as students. Even after our divorce, Grace seemed to still care about me, but it was hard for her to reach out because I hadn't reached out in any way. I informed her that I had been moved to the accounting department at work and that my new supervisor was a hard-charging, uncompromising individual. I had to study accounting diligently as a result, even on the weekends, which is why I enrolled in business school. I had no idea that you were teaching at this accounting school, Grace. Grace chuckled as well as I stated this. How ironic. However, if that's the case, I can support you. Grace told me, her eyes brightening, that she would be giving me extra lessons every weekend when I went to the school. She addressed all of my inquiries, and with the help of the assignments she devised, I was able to progressively acquire a thorough comprehension of the topic. Grace would always provide me with multiple solutions to any accounting-related issues I might have at work. I began to consider her suggestions, and once I had done so, submitted them to the business. Every weekend, I would spend hours arguing with Grace, and before I realized it, she had once again become a vital part of my life. Hey Grace, have you found someone else? I made the decision to ask the question that had been bothering me one day. Even though I started the divorce, I felt so self-centered asking Grace to get back together, but I had no choice. Grace shook her head silently. I laughed heartily and felt a deep sense of relief. What's the reason behind your laughter? Do you find it amusing that I'm not well liked? Grace gave me a scowl, as if she were irritated. No, that's not the case. All I can say is that I'm glad you're still single. I've been thinking back to our time as students and wishing we could get together once more. Grace's face brightened red at that. She appeared a little shy now that I had said that. She no longer had the serious instructor's face. Instead, it was the face of the wife I knew. Grace and I resumed our joint living after that. Grace was always willing to listen to my problems at work when I got home. By then, Grace was a dependable companion and an indispensable part of my life. There was undoubtedly change at the business. Jacob was working on a new management plan to grow the business even more. From an accounting standpoint, I wholeheartedly agree with Jacob. Naturally, a lot of Grace's ideas were included in this, but the firm kept it a secret. Then Jacob's management plan proved effective, significantly boosting the business's sales. My outstanding performance was soon the topic of conversation inside the organization. Impressed by my work, my passionate employer Jacob is rumored to be the next CEO. He asked me what went wrong. I blushed a little at Jacob's compliment. I found a really good accounting school and answered, Michael, I knew you had it in you. You've put in a lot of study time. As my right-hand guy, I want you to keep putting in a lot of effort at this organization. It made me very glad to hear this from my supervisor, Jacob, who is very energetic and well-respected. I was surprised to be promoted to a more senior role. I got remarried to Grace at that point. It may not be accurate to refer to it as a remarriage even if it was to the same woman, but that is unimportant. Despite receiving a promotion, I plan to leave the organization. My statement startled Jacob, who attempted to stop me, but I just wanted to be with Grace. I so put a lot of effort into my studies and was able to obtain my qualification as a tax accountant. I had started to find accounting to be interesting because of Grace. In addition, Grace was happily expecting a child. Now, Grace and I, the most significant person I ever let go because of my stupid pride, are going to start a CPA practice where I will serve as the principal accountant. Grace, the second opportunity I've been granted. I've promised myself not to waste it and to never